Controversy Crew, and we were playing Halbach Girls today in honor of Teresa Halbach. In 2005, Teresa was murdered, and to this day it can still be up for interpretation on who may have killed her. During this podcast, we will talk about the details of the case, the trials, and our own personal takes on what could have happened.
Also, we'd like to give a disclaimer that anything that we say in this video is not intended to make anybody mad, or it's not intended to offend anybody or give anybody disrespect. Everything that we're saying in this podcast is just information that we've gotten off of the internet and our own personal opinions on this case. So if we make jokes about the content and you don't like it, this probably isn't for you, given that our name is the Controversy Crew. And with that, here's our overview of the case.
On October 31st, 2005, Teresa Halbach went to Stephen Avery's property to take pictures of a car he was planning to sell.
A few days after she went to Stephen Avery's property, she was reported missing, and her car was later found at Stephen Avery's property as her last known location.
According to the court, Stephen Avery was found guilty of rape, murder, and the mutilation of Teresa Halbach's corpse. The evidence for this case is Teresa Halbach's car, which was found on Stephen Avery's property, Teresa Halbach's car keys, which were found in Stephen Avery's room. Her bone fragments were found in his fire pit. In this case, it was actually hard for the scientists to figure out what exactly happened to Teresa other than witness testimony, because her body was actually burned. All they had was bone fragments that they found in the fire pit, so they couldn't really tell exactly what had happened to Teresa.
They only had to go off of what witnesses said, and the witnesses were questionable.
The most reliable witness that they had in this case was Brendan Dassey.
He was at the Avery property while Halbach was there, so that's why he was put up as a suspect and why he was taken in for questioning.
During questioning, Brendan Dassey ended up confessing to the rape, murder, and mutilation of Teresa Halbach. He said that his uncle, Stephen Avery, was there and did everything. They both raped, killed, and burned her body. Teresa Halbach's body actually was not really...
It wasn't usable to work with her body because they only found bone fragments, because it is believed, it was a fact that she was burned in the fire. So there's no really way to tell and decipher her corpse with an autopsy of what could have happened to her. We just have the bone fragments to work off of, and putting together her skull by forensic anthropologists, it is believed that she was shot in the head twice. And the witness testimony they used in this case was so unprofessional, bizarre. It was... we will get into later.
The most predominant witness that they had was he lived right next to Stephen Avery, and he was Stephen Avery's nephew. Since he was so young and didn't really have knowledge of what exactly was going on, the police were really able to get him to say anything, which is something that's highly debated. The court did end up finding him guilty.
They basically, made him admit to the crime, while Dassey was guessing what the police wanted him to say about what him and Stephen did to the body.
The way this interview was conducted was beyond unprofessional, and it honestly makes me kind of sick how they executed this.
So the facts of this case are Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey have committed the murder, rape, and mutilation of Teresa Halbach's corpse.
They were sentenced to life in prison and are still currently serving their sentence.
They found loads of evidence on Stephen Avery's property, and they got a vocal confession from Brendan Dassey. They also live right next to each other, so the story kind of lines up that they did it together, right? Well, we have some opinions on that.
Now we are going to go into the things that don't quite add up as well. These will help explain our hot take.
So one of the things that don't quite settle well is if you watch the interview with Brendan Dassey, he's literally being told what to say. You can look in the footage of him being interviewed, and they're literally feeding him what to say. They're like, "What did you do to her head, Brendan? What did you do?" And he's like, "I punched her." "No, did you shoot her?" And he's like, "Yeah, I shot her." For real, he was just being led on so bad.
He has an IQ of 70. And for he's a minor too. And for reference, of how extremely low that is. The Army doesn't let you in at 83. He also said on a phone call with his mom that he was guessing what the officers were trying to tell him. Like, he did not know what was going on.
He just wanted to get out of there because he had a test.
A project for school, yeah.
Yeah, seriously, after the interview happened, he was like, okay, so when can I go home? Like, after he confessed, quote unquote, to murdering and raping this woman, he was like, so when can I go home? Because I have a test in 2 hours. For real. Like, he does not understand what's going on.
Another thing that was quite interesting, the blood that was found in Stephen Avery's car. I know I previously talked about EDTA. They tested the blood in Teresa's car for EDTA, so that if the blood in Teresa's car had EDTA, then it was full evidence that it was planted. But they only had 3 swabs tested when there were 6 blood spots in the car. So that was a point that Avery's lawyer brought up, was that they did not test all of the swabs. And they said it's not a normal test that they do, because normally, blood is not being planted inside of cars or anywhere. It's not normal, it's not being planted from a lab. But in this case, they didn't test every piece of evidence, and so they thought this was not handled well enough. They just thought this was a bad testing, and all of these things that happened with this case were poorly done things.
Yeah, like, really poorly handled. They actually, kept his house. So, normally when you go and inspect a crime scene, normally they spend, a day or 2, even less, actually. But one of the people who were there investigating said that this was the most unprofessional, investigation that they had ever seen, because they kept his house for, over 4 days. I think it was 4 days. It could have been 5.
4 days is plenty of enough time to plant evidence.
And, there were people just walking in and out without checking in, anything like that. What?
The next thing that we're going to talk about is Avery's previous case, where this woman with the last name of Berenstein, she was raped somewhere. I think it was on a beach. Yeah, I thought it was a beach. And the only evidence they had for that case was witness testimony. And witness testimony is not very good to have your only evidence resting on.
So many different things can affect witness testimony, especially being biased or anything against the person you're testifying against, which is frowned upon, but it still happened. And if you have traumatic experience, or if how old you are also affects it, and the time of day, and it really just depends on how you tell everything.
Yeah, the traumatic rape that was happened to Miss Berenstein could have affected who she chose out of a line of suspects. She chose Stephen Avery, and that was the thing. In that time, they did not like using DNA testing because it was not commonly known. There wasn't much evidence behind it because it was just new, just starting out. And then he got out of prison for the DNA sample. But we're talking about this because the trial that happened, the court was very against Stephen Avery. Almost like they had something against him. All the people working on this case were like, yeah, let's get Stephen Avery. Let's get him imprisoned. And we want him locked up. It seemed as if they were so biased towards him. Everyone in the court and this county being biased toward him could have lasted until his 2005 case with Halbach.
Plus, the case, the evidence that is sort of substantial for his previous case there was timestamps saying where he was, and it wasn't close to the beach where the raping happened. So I don't really think you can be in 2 places at once, because they were, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure they were over 20 miles.
Yeah, they had evidence saying that it wasn't Stephen Avery, and the only reason why, what is suspected to be the only reason why Miss Berenstein chose Stephen Avery out of the lineup is because previously one of the women who knew Stephen Avery from the police department said, what you're describing sounds like Stephen Avery. So obviously she's going to pick Stephen Avery out of the lineup. It really was biased against him, and then he sues the Manitowoc County Police Station, and then all of a sudden another thing happens against him. It just doesn't really line up that well.
And in both of these cases, it was such an unfair trial. You know how in our court system in America, we are supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. Well, these
They
were
had
like
the
held as
opposite.
if they were guilty until proven innocent. It was so unfair, and I feel like the sides didn't know where the burden of proof was on. So the trial testimonies and everything in court was just not done properly.
Okay, something else that didn't really line up for me, which kind of like leads into my hot take, is Bobby Dassey's trial testimony. So Bobby Dassey was related to Brendan Dassey. Bobby Dassey lived in the trailer right next to Stephen Avery. Well, Bobby Dassey says that he saw Teresa Halbach taking pictures of Stephen Avery's car and then saw her walk towards Stephen Avery's trailer, and he never saw her again. Well, a couple things don't really line up with that, because after he saw Teresa Halbach and like never saw her again, he actually left his house. Like, when Stephen Avery says that Teresa Halbach left, Bobby Dassey also left at that same exact time, as if he were following her. Why would he be leaving if he just saw Stephen Avery lure a girl into his trailer? It kind of doesn't really line up. It kind of makes more sense for Bobby Dassey to be following Teresa away from Stephen Avery's property. Also, Bobby Dassey, since he was related to Stephen Avery, would have had access to the inside of Stephen Avery's trailer. He would have had access to the fire pit. He would have had access to all of these places to set up Stephen Avery. Also, he was reported, I think his mom reported him, it was someone related to him, who reported that the day after Teresa Halbach went missing, he had scratches on his back, like from where he was pinning someone down. Like, it kind of looked like that. It looked like somebody had reached around his back and was clawing at his back, and they had cut his skin. It was just really suspicious. Also, Bobby Dassey was friends with Teresa Halbach's ex-boyfriend. And Teresa Halbach's ex-boyfriend also has quite the suspicious trial testimony. So Teresa's ex-boyfriend said that he didn't know Bobby Dassey and that they were not friends, but that actually reported to be false, and they actually did know each other. Also, he said in trial that he called Teresa on the day that she went missing and her voicemail box was full. So he guessed her password, got into her voicemails, and went through all of them. Well, after that, they also had someone in court who had access to Teresa Halbach's voicemail files, and they said that apparently the time that her ex-boyfriend had reportedly called her and the voicemail box was full, she got another voicemail, which means that it couldn't have been full. Either A, he's lying about her voicemail box being full for some reason so that he could go through her voicemails, or B, he deleted a voicemail. And why would he do that unless he was trying to hide something on the day that she went missing?
Exactly, and we already have evidence that he was lying about knowing Bobby Dassey, and it seems that he's lying about these voicemails too. So if you can lie about multiple things, who's to say what they are telling the truth about or lying about? Because they took an oath to tell the truth, but yet they're not even telling the truth here, so they might also be not lying for other reasons. More about the blood in Halbach's car. It had Avery's blood in there, but the only wound that they could find on Stephen was in his palm area. It said that he was wearing gloves because there was no fingerprints in the car. So how would blood from the hand that was inside a glove get onto the car with there being a glove on? That part doesn't quite add up, so the blood maybe could have been planted from a family member or neighbor or anyone who was trying to set him up in a way.
So that also kind of lines up with the theory that the police were setting him up because since he had been previously convicted, they had a tube of his blood, which, like said before, had a hole in the top of it from where somebody had taken blood out of it. So if Stephen Avery couldn't have possibly gotten blood in the car without getting his fingerprints in the car, somebody must have put it in there, and it's kind of looking like the police did it because they had access to his blood.
The only thing that might help prove that Stephen is guilty is that he called the place where Teresa worked and he was like, I specifically want Teresa at my place. That's the only thing to say he's not guilty about.
And he's worked with Teresa a bunch. Teresa would always come to the Avery property and take pictures of the cars that they were going to sell. So it feels like it would just be a normal thing because he said like he was friends with Teresa before this and they were like had a decent relationship between the two of them.
Yeah, but it's just convenient that
It's convenient
on
that
the day she
was
went
happening.
missing, he was like, I want Teresa at my house. Like, that's the only thing that doesn't help us.
Really what they're relying on is the evidence that they have, which totally could have been tampered with, being that the house was open for 4 days for people to just walk in and out of.
Didn't it take them like a few days to find the car keys when they were right in the open?
Yeah.
It was insane.
The car keys were just sitting directly out in the open, and they were like, oh, we didn't find the car keys. Like, maybe that's because they weren't there until somebody planted them.
Yeah.
Also, something suspicious that happened kind of like that was they couldn't find the bullet in the garage. So there was a bullet sitting in the garage. They had searched the garage like tons of times before. They couldn't find the bullet. Then one of the police officers that actually helped with Stephen Avery's previous case and got him convicted falsely, he came, he looked around the scene. The next day, the bullet was found. That's kind of sounding like he planted it there.
So our hot takes for this case are Stephen Avery and
Brendan
Dassey, I almost said Bobby, are innocent. We think that they had evidence planted on them and they're just pure guys. Olivia, your theory is?
Yeah, my theory is a little bit different. I think that the police were involved and were trying to frame him, but they didn't do everything. I think that Bobby Dassey and Teresa Halbach's ex-boyfriend killed Teresa Halbach, and then the police realized, wow, this is quite the opportunity. It really looks like Stephen Avery's guilty. And so they decided now's the time. They could just be biased towards him and get him convicted. So they could have planted the evidence, or they could have not planted the evidence, and maybe Bobby Dassey did that. But either way, I think that the police were biased towards Stephen since he was suing them, and Bobby Dassey and Teresa Halbach's ex-boyfriend killed her.
I think this isn't, well, it is kind of a hot take, but I'm kind of grossed out on how they executed everything. Like, you have to...
Yeah, hot take, Manitowoc County is bad at their justice system. Bad police department investigation and
like
trials.
The way they did every part of this case, even Stephen Avery's previous cases, are appalling, honestly. Like,
maybe we should look into that, like different cases that Manitowoc County has done that are just.
But like, yeah, like the way they did everything was just honestly so gross. And honestly, I hope those people kind of got out of the justice system. Maybe they're working for McDonald's. I don't know.
Okay. I don't even know if it's a hot take anymore, but I think we're all in agreement that Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey are totally innocent.
Stephen Avery, maybe in the slim chance
he might have done something, but Brendan?
No way.
Brendan is innocent.
That is a fact. It's not even a hot take anymore.
Like,
Brendan's innocent.
The stuff they had him confess, he was straight up like...
He was guessing.
Guessing for that.
Right, he wanted approval.
He was like, I cut her hair, and they're like, no, you shot her, Brendan. Did you shoot her?
Like, and he was like,
they checked the scene.
Shot. Right.
They checked the scene, and he did not cut her hair.
Right.
There would have been hair follicles to find on the scene.
Right.
Nothing to find. That seems like a good place to end it off there. Thank you for listening into our podcast, and have a nice day.